Good afternoon. This is Debra V. Wilson. I am in Bradford. The day is Friday, and the date is the 19th of June, 2020. This is a very brief podcast. And what I'm looking at, I'm very curious around identity, as identity being constructs of identity being a window into performative behavior. So what you call yourself and how you identify yourself influences how you perform that identity. And so all these things are a factor of when you are, where you are, in the space you have to be, the identity you self-define by. And the identity I'm looking at and I look at all identities as, in the way they're performed, as constructed. And the identity today, that I actually woke up this morning thinking about, was the identity of the female, the woman, and how that looks and how it's looked across the ages. For example, in the U.S., the construct of the white woman as fragile and therefore validating constructs of othering of Black Americans, both men and women. And then I look at the construct of modern day white woman and what are referred to as Karens, and it's still that fragility. And that fragility that in that construct of white women means that her behavior is justified by the fact that she's inherently fragile. And then I look at the construct of Black women in America, not constructed as fragile, barely constructed as human, highly sexualized, which means you can do or say anything to those identified as Black and a woman, a Black American woman, if you so choose to buy into that constructive narrative. And then I ask the question, when do people decide not to internalize a prevalent construct of an identity, a prevalent narrative around an identity, and why they don't accept it? Because some people do accept very limited constructs of an identity for a myriad of reasons. They don't believe they have a choice. It's go along to get along. Identities around queerness. The constructed narrative that gay men are weak and at the same time all potentially predatory. Certainly I don't know any gay man that has accepted the latter, but I do know some gay men who have internalized the belief that because they're gay, that means they're weak, a physical weakness. And then also some lesbian women who have taken upon themselves to internalize the narrative that if they're lesbian, they're rough and tough and tumble. So if I continue to look at narratives, constructed identities, and the performance of that constructed identity as something that is fluid, that we can change the way we define something we have identified, then I ask myself, why does a current performance of said identity exist? And it's, in my opinion, again, going back to the construct of the woman, it's to facilitate and legitimize the status quo. And then I look at, so I'm 62 years old, and I look at the queer community back in the day when I was young. Black-American context, Chicago. And the group of men, black, again, black, who identified as queens, quote unquote. And those queens were effeminate, gay men, quote unquote. And they took great power in mimicking constructs of fragility. It's the fragility we typically saw in America in the construct of white women as white American women as an identity. And here you had these black men who defined as queens because they were gay men who self-defined and was projected onto them that they were effeminate, quote unquote. And I saw in my 20s, and perhaps even younger, the fluidity of how we define a narrative and the control we have. The people can project anything onto you, but your control is whether you accept it. You can reject it altogether. You can accept it in part and then empower it, which I saw some black gay men from Chicago back in the day take the identity of being an effeminate, quote unquote, gay man and being quite demonstrative in this and loud and beautifully aggressive and assertive and owning the space that had been allotted to them. And instead of the identity of being effeminate, silencing them and shaming them, they became even louder with it and more exaggerated, thereby saying, you can call me what you like, but I am what I am. So today, this morning, like I said, I got up. I woke up wondering how and why narratives around identity are constructed, and it's for a purpose. To relegate people to a place on society constructed hierarchies. To maintain the societal status quo. To demonstrate power. Because those who define you are the ones with the power. And so it is why I've always found it so fascinating what black gay men who defined as queens. So very fascinating and so powerful. These were gay men, not the most welcomed identity, certainly not back in the day. Black and a man, equally problematic back in the day. And they were effeminate, and even in the gay community, black gay community, and I would dare say larger gay community, they were looked down upon. And they took the attempt at shaming them to not only empower them and take up more space instead of limiting them, They were louder, bolder, and more powerful. They also repeatedly gave voice to the fact of the artificial nature of narratives created around identity and the politics that underpin them. You are who you are and who you decide to be. Now, how society understands you is definitely an indicator of the society in which you emerge and exist. But who and what you accept around self and your identity is you, and that is your power. And how you experience narratives around your identity, or I should say identities, is your freedom of choice. To accept in total, to reject in total, and recreate something new, or to subvert and take what's been lobbed upon you and still make it your own. This is DebraVWilson. I'm in Bradford, and I'm constantly thinking about who we are, where we are, and why. This is DebraVWilson again in Bradford. Thank you.